I would like to paint a picture for you. It's kind of like a guided meditation, and I know Rick has done that in the past. So I'd just sit back, and if you'd like, close your eyes for a while, and maybe you'll fall asleep like I would as a teenager. We used to sit up there, and during my father's sermons, we would just tune out and count the hours down, or the minutes, actually, it felt like hours, until church was over. Anyway, picture yourself awakening in Santa Fe, New Mexico, after flying in from New Jersey the night before. It's 7 a.m. Santa Fe time, but 9 o'clock your body time. And it feels so luxurious just lying there in bed in your hotel room. And when you finally open the curtains of the hotel room, you are greeted with this incredibly blue sky. I call it New Mexico blue. It's like no other blue you can ever see. And because you're at 7,000 feet and the humidity runs between 5 and 15% all the time, everything is in razor-sharp focus. It's as though you are looking through the finest of Hasselblad lenses where every single detail is in sharp relief. Maybe you head on down to the plaza. All the adobe-like architecture of the buildings and their colors makes you feel as though you are someplace south of the border. The temperature is only in the low 60s, and it feels delightful in the low humidity. You also know that the day won't get any hotter than the mid-80s, and the sun will be bright. And that feels so good compared to New Jersey in the summer. Maybe you're hungry, it's 10 o'clock. So you head on down San Francisco Street to Tia Sophia's. Tia's has the best breakfast in town and the best huevos rancheros too. So you go there, walk in, take a table, and sit down. Sounds of Spanish guitar play in the background. Your waitress comes. She has dark Spanish eyes that sparkle and dance with light. And when she asks for your order, you say, huevos rancheros. And she asks, red or green chili? Which is the hottest, you ask? She says, red. Make it red. Bueno. So you sit back with a cup of coffee and wait while the music plays in the background. Then your order comes. You see eggs sunny side up over a tortilla, and it's all smothered with red chilies. And then it's garnished with shreds of cheese. And the chilies in New Mexico are different from any other chilies around. There's something about that. The weather, the soil, and the temperatures make it have a taste that is like nothing else. So you take a taste, your first taste of New Mexico in over a year. And it's hot and spicy, and you can feel the little dancing devils on your tongue mingle with all the tastes. And you just sit there and breathe, and you go, ah. Maybe later, around noon, when the carillons of the Cathedral de San Francisco are ringing, you'll have lunch at the Shed. Maybe you'll order green chili stew to go with a plate of chili rellenos, or the Shed's enchiladas. That's a hard choice. They're both good. But as their enchiladas are the best in town, you choose blue corn enchiladas, again, with red chilies. And it comes, and there it is. And along with it comes what are called sopapillas. And you break it open, and you pour honey into its open cavities. And you take that taste. The only way I could describe it for you is it's muy sabrosa. Finally, you get into your car and you take the Santa Fe Taos Road north to Espanola. On the way, you pass Tesuque, and then the Santa Fe Opera, and then you pass Pewaukee. And right there, this vista opens up before you, a vista of pastel blues and tans and greens. And you feel as though you are driving right into a Renoir landscape, and you disappear and you emerge in those colors. And then you come to Nambe, You see the sign for Route 503. You turn right, and the road winds up through the orchards, apple orchards and orange groves. And then you come to a church, an adobe church, and the road makes this big, wide bend to the left, and then a big, wide curve to the right. And suddenly, the Malpai of the San Dr. Cristo Mountains opens before you. It's a wasteland of erosion that is so beautiful. Its colors are this golden tan, and it's all dotted with green chamisa bushes that make it look like sleeping jaguars. And as you drive deeper into this land, it gets more and more broken because it's naked, and it also becomes very spiritual. It is once both beautiful and forbidding. In the nakedness of the riverbeds and the hills, they are stripped bare down to the naked bones. As you continue on, you look out at that landscape and you wonder, maybe the inner landscape within me, my own inner world, is not very much unlike that landscape on the outside. But maybe you don't think that. So you come to Juan Medina Road, you turn left, and it winds way down into this valley where you come to a village called Chimayo. There's a santuario there that people go to. Maybe you stop there for the holy dirt. It's called Tierra Bendita. Maybe you don't. So you continue on for a few miles where you come to a stop sign, and you turn left. And in less than a quarter of a mile, there's an unmarked road. You take it. It winds up into the hills for a little bit, and then where the macadam ends, it turns into a dirt road. And it is there that you leave Rand McNally behind. You enter a world where there are no reference points of the Western civilization. And you come to your final destination. It's called La Posada, the inn. Once it was a bed and breakfast, but it's no longer in operation. And only guests from the past can come there if they so choose. But you're on your own. Gerald, the chef who used to sing for the San Francisco Opera, is no longer there. And Sue, the owner, long ago got tired of making frittatas and souffles and whatever. So you're on your own. And you sit in the room. It's a real adobe. You sit on one of the chairs and you become aware of absolute, total silence. You let it fill you. And as it fills you, you feel yourself stilling, getting quieter and quieter. That stillness and that silence is so solid, so deep. It is amazing. It's like a rock. And I call it original silence. God's very voice that spoke before the beginning. And it is absolutely marvelous. So there you are, you're sitting, and New Jersey and the Western civilization just disappears. You become part of the land. And you just rest there and let yourself heal. So if you haven't fallen asleep, you can open your eyes now and come back. And that place that I was telling you about is a place that I would go to every summer. And it's a place where you can let go of all the barriers of 20th century or 21st century now, things that sort of separate you from nature, from others, and even from God. And that's a whole other sermon in itself. But what I want to do is introduce you to a person who used to live there. Her name was Sophie Trujillo. And she was 95 when I saw her last. That was 10 years ago. So I'm sure she's gone on ahead, as they say in the Sangres. But she was a pip. She didn't miss anything. She was sharp as a tack. She took care of her own chickens, chopped her own wood, and you should have seen her with an axe. Oh my gosh, she didn't need a log splitter. And she was amazing. And she had a wicked sense of humor. Now, on occasion, she liked to smoke cigars. And she loved tequila. And not the Jose Cuervos, but the real añejos and agaves from Mexico. And she also would have a good stock of mezcal, which always had a big, huge, fat worm in the bottom. And one night, when some of the guests were at her place, she invited me to have the honor of swallowing the worm. And I said, no, thank you. And she just chuckled and laughed. He said, are you a hombre or are you I forget what the word was, but it kind of means a sissy. And mariquita, I think was the word. So she took the bottle and swallowed the whole thing. And she said, the secret of long life is eating the worm. And I said, I'd rather have a short life and just drink the tequila. So she laughed real hard at that, and she said, oh, mijillo, you are no gringo. Your wife must be a lucky, lucky woman, you know. If I were young and pretty, I would drink all kinds of tequila with you. So she, like I said, she was a pip. The thing about Sophia, though, was that she was not a very religious person. She was more spiritual. I remember one day she was telling me she didn't have too much use for priests. She said, some are good, but some are useless. Now, the Spanish word she used, I can't repeat here. It wasn't useless. It was another word. So I'll leave that to your imagination. But what she did say is that for her, as far as she was concerned, priests were afraid of God. They put God in a church, lock him up, keep him safe, far away, so that he can't touch you or shake the ground under your feet. And then came the mind blower. She said, see those beautiful shadows on that hill? And I turned and looked and I said, She said, oh, and see, the hill was this beautiful yellow tan, and the shadows of all the erosion and everything was these colors of mauve and purple and bishop's purple and lavender. It was just gorgeous. And she said, when noontime comes, all those shadows are going to be gone, and that hill is going to look like nothing but mud. And she said, do you understand? And I said, yeah, I think so. She said, no, I don't think you do. And then she went on to talk about the blessings of the shadows. She said, it is the shadows in life that give beauty and meaning. She said, God is in both the shadows and the sunlight. They are part of each other. Now, those words would come back to me a year ago, April, and I'll get to that in a minute. But what I want to tell you a little bit is that Sophie's house, her casita, was open to everybody at any time. She was the image of hospitality. And at night, we guests would go over there for biscochitos and coffee. And let me tell you, her coffee could skin the hide off a mule. And she made mean margaritas, too, let me tell you. But at any rate, she would be holding court around her wood stove, and she'd tell us stories. There were all kinds of stories. The one, though, that was always in demand had to do with La Muerta. She had many names, La Comadre, Doña Sebastiani, but she's the death angel with long, flowing black hair. Sometimes she's dressed in a cassock, other times she's playing a guitar and singing lullabies. Other times she's always in her death cart, and she is never far away. Those stories, they're long, they're short, some are serious, but some are so funny that you just laugh like crazy. I wish I could tell you some of those stories, but there's not time. I just want to bring your attention to the fact of laughter. Those funny stories were always about Pedro trying to trick Death, but Death always had the last word, and in ways that were so funny that she couldn't help but laugh. So when I asked her about it, she said, here in the Sangres, it is morbid not to talk about death. It is morbid to keep death away and invisible. She said, here we laugh with death. We play with death. We sing with it. We dance with it. We taunt it. And yes, we are scared, but we love her. And I said, wow, that is really different. And then she said, during the Day of the Dead, we make sugar skulls. We make skulls of candy with all kinds of sequins and beads and all kinds of flavors. And then she said, and when death comes in chocolate and peanut butter, it is muy sabrosa. So she was, like I said, she was a character. Now, I don't know if many of you are familiar with the Day of the Dead. Some of you might be. But in Mexico and other countries, it is a period of celebration from October the 31st to November the 2nd. It's a blast. There are parades or festivals. People are having prayers for the deceased. People will set a table for the deceased with all their favorite foods and beverages. It's just a time of gaiety. There's also these skeletons, these papier-mâché skeletons that are absolute works of art. And the favorite is Katrina, who's this person with big bony fingers, long bony fingers. She's always dressed as the grande dame, and she has this big wide brim hat filled with roses. Some of them are incredibly funny, and I'm going to take a little bit of time to tell you about the funniest one, because here's the laughter again. It's about this big, and there are 3 skeletons on it that are about this long, and they're all on beach chairs. They have sandals on. They have big, huge, dark glasses, and they have their feet crossed. One's listening to a boombox, and the other is like a cigarette, and the guy in the middle is reading Life magazine. See, and there's the laughter. And we at Prospect were doing something like that. We opened with When the Saints Go Marching, and tell me, it rocked. I thought I was in Bourbon Street in New Orleans. You know, so here we had that celebration, and we had pictures of past and present saints. So we are kind of doing that same kind of thing here, that laughing and having a good time rather than to lament. But what really is a saint? One of the best definitions I ever heard was given by Sheldon Kopp. He's a psychiatrist. And he said, saints are not flawless, but people who are extraordinarily human. What made them saints was they let go of everything, every reference point, everything that defined them, and plunged into the unknown with only faith and trust. And instead of drowning, they found life-giving waters that kept them afloat. So their stories are stories of faith. And they show us that, yes, we too, if we dare to let go and plunge in, we too will be found. We will not be lost. And Thomas Merton put it another way. He said, 0 equals infinity. And what he meant by that is when you let go of all your attachments, your ego attachments, you become part of the all. I saw an example of that in Tuesdays with Morrie. Some of you might have read that. But it's written about this person, Morrie, who is suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease. And the story he gives to his person who's writing it goes like this. I heard a nice little story the other day. He closes his eyes for a moment, and I wait. Okay, the story is about a little wave bobbing along in the ocean, having a grand old time. He's enjoying the wind and the fresh air until he notices the other waves in front of him are crashing against the shore. My God, this is terrible, the wave says. Look what's going to happen to me. Then along comes another wave. It sees the first wave looking grim, and it says to him, why do you look so sad? The first wave says, you don't understand, we are going to crash. All of us waves are going to be nothing. It's terrible. The second wave says, no, you don't understand. You are not a wave. You are part of the ocean. I smile. Morrie closes his eyes again. Part of the ocean, he says. Part of the ocean. Now, if you've read Tuesdays with Morning, you will know how extraordinarily human he was. And what does that mean? When I was 10 years old, my father told me, I couldn't believe I understood it then, but he said, the opposite of sin is not flawlessness, but faithfulness. And the more human we become, the more Christ-like and loving we will become. And then he said, Christ's full humanity was his full divinity. And like I said, I was 10 years old and understood it, and that's scary. But I'll never forget it. He also told me that the word for perfect in the New Testament is teleoo. It doesn't mean flawless. So if you look at it, it means Christ was made perfect through his sufferings. He dared to be vulnerable. He dared to embrace everything in the Garden of Gethsemane. And as I tell my clients, life is a date with Gethsemane. And there will be Good Fridays. But if you stay, Easter follows. And here at Prospect, we have many saints past, present, and future. They are all a part of that wide ocean that is in everything, even the rocks and the trees. By no means were they or are these saints flawless. They were and are human beings struggling in their life of faith and trust. Sometimes I'm sure they felt abandoned and overwhelmed, but they persevered. They tell us that no matter what happens, all will be well. And in all manners of things, all will be well. And those words were written by Julian of Norwich, who went through 2 plagues and saw all kinds of death. So what I want to do is share with you something very, very personal that has to do with Communion of Saints. A year ago, April, I was on my way to the hospital in Princeton where Carol was. I had no idea that within a few hours there was going to be total darkness. But it was a gorgeous day. The sun was out, the sky was blue, temperature was great. And when I got to the hospital, Carol looked very, very weak. It was kind of scary weak. And what had happened is, about a week before, she had gone into the hospital with severe intestinal or abdominal pain, and they thought it was diverticulitis. It took them 4 days to find out that it was a perforated appendix. So it had walled off and caused a big cyst and everything. So they did emergency surgery. Everything was going fine. The nurses came to take Carol's vitals, so I excused myself and went to a waiting room. Now, I have no idea what made me go back. I was updating my phone, and I hadn't finished. But something, I just said, well, maybe I better go back. I almost didn't. But something told me to go. I went. Thank God I did, because when I found her, she was slumped over and her head was almost on the floor. She had this cardiac arrest, and they were able to resuscitate her. But the terror was not over. In a period of 20 hours, she had 30 cardiac arrests. And she had 9 in the last 20 minutes. And Kristen and I were in the room there when all this was happening. And the doctor shook his head. He said, the next one is probably going to be your last. And I just cannot believe what that felt like. But in all that, there were these moments of light. There were these doctors and nurses who did heroic things. There were doctors and nurses that were so kind, it was unbelievable. And then there were friends who came from California, Arizona, Virginia. Our daughter's best friend from California, Rachel McFarland. And I see some young kids here, so yes, Rachel McFarland is Seth MacFarlane's sister. And yes, she does voices on Family. not Family Guy, American Dad. She's Haley. Well, she came. And we had all these, Rick came. People from Prospect were calling. And Kristen and I had this sense of being held by angels. One of my most beautiful memories was Kristen singing to Carol. She was singing Tender Shepherd. It's from Peter Pan, and she was holding Carol's hand. It was absolutely stunning. A lot of things like that. Now, this is getting too long. I'm trying to shorten this down. For Carol, who was on the other side, so to speak, actually literally, she had other experiences. She saw crucifixion. She saw flaming pits of fire. And she saw these very evil-looking arms beckoning her to come to step across. But what saved her was a little tiny angel named Celia Marie. That's our granddaughter. Carol kept calling her name out over and over and over again. Celia Marie, Celia Marie, Celia Marie. And she, as Carol said, that brought me back. She also said something else too. She said, I made a promise that if Cece, that's what we call Celia, if Cece ever comes to the gates before her time, I will send her back. It was this bond of love. It was amazing. Flawed people, person almost at death, child who had just starting their life. It was a communion of saints. And then lastly, what Carol said, that when she was in recovery, when she had to learn how to walk all over again, when she was at Robert Wood Johnson, she had to go through unbelievable things. But she felt the communion of saints around her. She felt them holding her, embracing her, lifting her up, and she recovered. It's amazing. She's back to dancing. She's doing jazzercise and aerobics, and she's in this dance troupe. And the doctors, they cannot understand it. Not only is it a miracle she survived, it's a miracle that she recovered as she did. But I'd like to think that it's because of that communion of saints that holds us. All the people around us, all the saints of Prospect, past, present, and future, they're all there. They're all in everything. So I'll conclude by giving you a quote from Octavio Paz in Labyrinthus of Solitude. He said, "Tell me how you died, and I'll tell you how you lived." The opposite is true, too. Tell me how you lived, and I'll tell you how you die. And the saints at Prospect have taught us how to live. They are an example. They are stories of faith that tell us if we persevere, in the face of fear and anxiety, all will be well. But it's so hard to do that, to really be vulnerable. But as Sophie said, God is in the shadows. Sophie was a saint, and she was an angel.